In the dense, tangled thickets of Virginia's wilderness, where underbrush grew thick and visibility stretched no more than a few feet in any direction, the Union and Confederate armies clashed in one of the Civil War's most chaotic and brutal encounters. From May 5th to May 7, 1864, the Battle of the Wilderness erupted as Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant pushed southward in his Overland campaign, determined to destroy General Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. The forested terrain nullified traditional tactics. Smoke from musket fire and artillery hung low between the trees, mixing with the morning mist and choking the men who fought blindly in the undergrowth. Fires sparked by gunfire swept across parts of the battlefield, burning wounded soldiers alive and turning the wilderness into a nightmarish hellscape. By the final day, May 7th, the battle had devolved into a grim stalemate. Both armies, exhausted and bloodied, held their respective positions. Sporadic skirmishes and sniper fire persisted, but no major assaults were launched. The dense woods, riddled with the dead and dying, offered little strategic gain for either side. Lee, wary of further engagement in such inhospitable terrain, held his ground defensively. Grant, refusing to retreat like his predecessors, made a momentous decision that evening. Rather than fall back, the Union Army would continue its march southward towards Spotsylvania Courthouse. It was not a victory in the traditional sense, but a shift in the war's momentum. The relentless pursuit had begun. The Battle of the Wilderness ended with no clear victor, but Grant's resolve signaled a new kind of warfare, one that would grind on, unceasing, until the Confederacy fell.
Out here at the Brock Road, in the intersection, Gettys ends up running into Heth's division, and it becomes a hotly contested fight. Wadsworth and Gettys are doing everything that they can to maintain the location that they're at, and Heth is pushing them back, and it's working for a while for the Confederates. Now in this area here is the Brock Road that we're talking about. And this is where the Union troops are coming down, and they're pushing towards that intersection. They're filling in from all around, and they're coming from this direction as well as they're headed towards that Brock Road orange plank intersection. Now at the time that the fight starts happening out here at the Brock Road, Lee goes out to the Widow Tap field, and I'll take you over there in a second so you can see that field and the clearing that's out there. And he realizes he has an opportunity to set up guns out there for artillery. That's one of the strengths that they have. So he brings his artillery out there and he places them in the field out there towards the junction that he's trying to protect or trying to fight for. He puts 12 guns out there trying to hit the plank road, orange plank road. And then that's when the fight for the orange plank road really begins. So now we're taking a look at things from the Confederate point of view. If you take a look at the distance behind me here, that's Saunders Field. And all of these works that are wrapping behind me are Confederate earthworks that are still out here from the Battle of the Wilderness. They're pretty deep over in this location where the clearing is. You can see the cannon set up in the background there. Artillery piece facing off in this direction. This is where the men would have been located when those first initial attacks happened, coming across that field in this direction. This is where the Zouaves are coming and trying to capture this location. This is it's a pretty neat view from here. We're going to head over to a location that shows the earthworks wrapping around, and you can get a real good view of the full length of the line. Most of the earthworks today are out here in the tree line, and it's hard to see them. Out in this location here, you can actually see the earthworks behind me stretching around. And as I move around across Saunders Field, you can see just how long this line stretches. It runs all the way down there behind me into the woods. When the Federals came pouring out of the woods across the field over here and down that turnpike directly to my rear, there was roughly 6,000 of them that were trying to make their way up here. And the Confederates poured into these fields to the left and to the right and immediately started putting up their breastworks. The roar of battle was on May 5th, 1864, and from that point forward, they started fighting on a 1 mile long stretch from my right hand side to my left hand side. And it would continue to rage on until the night before everything stopped to a lull and then commenced the next day early in the morning before the sun even came up. So where I'm going out to now is called the Higgerson Farm. Now Miss Higgerson, she was a nice looking old lady, meaning she had a very mean face. She owned the farm out here, her family owned the farm out here, and it was one of the only clearings that was in the area during the Battle of the Wilderness. You can see behind me here, it's a nice, beautiful open field. Great place for combat if you're doing Napoleonic warfare. Miss Higgerson did not take kindly to the Union Army being on her property. She comes out of her house and she is berating the Yankees, yelling at them, cursing at them, and she's predicting their demise. One soldier from Pennsylvania said, "We didn't pay her much attention until we had to fall back." She was right about their demise. They didn't get to keep the location that they're at right now here at the Higgerson Farm because the Confederates would come upon them and fight them and push them out of this location. Today I'm going to head out there towards where the house is, and you'll see there's not much left, just a few rocks on the ground from where the chimney used to be placed for the old farmhouse. And I'll see if I can't find a picture to post online of what the house used to look like. Now here in a second you'll see what's left of the Higgerson house right behind me, and that's that bunch of rocks that are stacked up back there that used to be the chimney stack for the house. The house is facing in this direction, the direction I'm walking in right now, and the old woman's outside of her house yelling at these Union soldiers that are pouring across her field, probably trampling her crops and scaring her animals off and all that sort of stuff. So probably not a unrealistic reaction to thousands of men pouring across your field and destroying your property. But her vitriol was most likely influenced by her feelings for the other soldiers too. When the Pennsylvanians had to come back across this field, they remembered that old woman, and they remembered what she had to say when she was out on her front porch. Now I'm walking the farm road towards the Chewning Farm, or at least the location of where the Chewning Farm was, because the house is no longer there. During the Battle of the Wilderness, the farm was looted for everything that it had. But thankfully, the farmhouse itself wasn't burnt down to the ground and it wasn't destroyed. So Mr. Chewning was able to move back into his home and continue his life out here in the middle of the wilderness. When Crawford moved his men in over here, it looked like it was a good point to exploit an advantage facing the Confederates. But he soon found out that this location where the Chewning Farm was kind of a no man's land. And it became a gap in between the two armies that eventually would be closed up by A.P. Hill. Now Gettys advances, and he's fighting, and he's receiving a terrible volley to his front, and he ends up asking for assistance. He gets that assistance when Brigadier General Hayes shows up with his men. Hayes gets to his position and starts forming up his men. He's on horseback, and when he gets to that position where he's at, he starts to stop and talk to some of the men from his old unit, the 63rd. But by the time he stops, Hayes is hit by a bullet. And Brigadier General Hayes ends up dying here at the Battle of the Wilderness. Now General Hayes, I talked about in a previous video. An outstanding man. One heck of a soldier. But he was also a very dear friend to General Grant and General Hancock. Upon learning of his death, it seemed to devastate the general, and he couldn't take it. I'll take you over to the location where he was mortally wounded here at the Battle of the Wilderness. Out here on the busy road, the Brock Road, is the monument that stands to General Hayes, which is directly behind me here. Out in this area somewhere is where General Hayes fell mortally wounded when coming up along his line here and talking to the 63rd Pennsylvania. As he was standing somewhat in this area, or on the back of a horse, a bullet hits him and kills him. Nighttime comes in these fields on the evening of the 5th of May. And darkness starts to surround these people left and right. Officers notice stragglers trying to make their way back. Men are scared. They're confused. They don't know where they're at. During the daytime, this place is so confusing walking through the woods that it's very easy just to get lost. Even today myself, I was out on a trail with blue dots trying to direct me which way to go. And at one point I actually questioned whether or not I was heading in the right direction. These men didn't have blue dots to guide them through, and it was the middle of the night. And all night long these men are hearing the crackling flames on some of the fields. They're hearing the screams of the wounded, the dying. They can hear their comrades shivering and crying because of the fear that they feel from the battle that happened that day. And they know that the only thing that they got to look forward to is the sun coming up the next day. And more of the same. Now at this location, the Chewning Farm, it may not seem like a whole lot. It's just a big wide open field when you get out here. There's no buildings in place, there's nothing out here to kind of indicate anything other than a couple of signs from the National Park Service to let you know what happened out here. But if you look over my shoulder, as I pan back around in this direction over here, you can see the remains of the Parker Store Road. That was an old road that used to run through here that brought you out to the Parker Store. It was a farm road. It was traveled often by the farmers that are out here. And it's the only thing that breaks up this dense wilderness out here that's not the orange plank or the turnpike or the Brock. It's just a dirt road. Basic plain dirt road. Well, the Union Army knows that there's a gap between Saunders Field, which is in that direction, and a gap between the fight that's happening over at the Brock Road intersection and the Plank Road. Back this way over here. They decide they're going to send troops up through this country road and fill that gap with Union soldiers, and then possibly attack on the flanks of the Confederate Army. A.P. Hill and Lee realize that's about to happen, so they send Hill out here to fill this gap. He rushes out here in this location, but on May 6th, when he's getting up early in the morning to get out here, he's almost taken captive. He sees the troops coming and he doesn't have a whole lot around him to protect himself. He tells his horsemen quietly, "Get on your horse, grab your reins, turn around, ride away, and don't look back." They listen to him and calmly move. And they avoid capture out here and disaster for themselves at the Chewning Farm. Later on, another thing happens. Lee and A.P. Hill are out here having a conversation on the porch of the Chewning Farm. And there's a hole in the top of the building. And one of the soldiers sticks his head out the top and takes a look down these fields across behind me. They see artillery pieces moving away from the wilderness. Grant is back on the move. This time, his destination is towards Spotsylvania. He's trying to get to Richmond. Lee now has to shift his entire army, and seeing that happen, he wants to advance and beat him to the crossroads yet again. And that ends up bringing on the Battle of Spotsylvania, where some of the fiercest fighting in the year of 1864 actually takes place. One of the deadliest conflicts and some of the most severe hand-to-hand combat ever happens right there at Spotsylvania, especially at a place called the Mule Shoe Salient. Now for some battlefield orientation. I'm going to put the map up and talk you through that first initial fight as it's going down the Orange Turnpike. If you look on the map on the screen, you see Johnson's off to the left-hand side, and you see Early is off to the right-hand side for the Confederates, right there on the left-hand side of your screen. Going across the way, looking at the Yankee side, if you're looking at the Union soldiers in the direction that they're going, you have Ricketts off to the right, Griffin himself is set up in the center, and Warren is back at his headquarters near the Lacey Farm. All the way off into the rear, however, you can see Getty, where Grant is set up, and Wheaton. Wheaton and Getty are headed down towards that Brock Road intersection that I was telling you about, the Brock Road and Orange Plank that we're going to go to. All throughout the section where the Confederates are is Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, and a few other various units like Alabama. All throughout the fields, Saunders Fields and such, for the Yankees, the Northerners have Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin, and various other units, including artillery pieces that are out there, and the special units of the Zouaves. Now Burnside gets into the fight out here too, and his men come up, but they come up late. They come up slow. And really, This is the moment for Burnside to come out here and impress General Grant. He has the full opportunity to do so, but he squanders that opportunity. His unit's very slow getting up. He takes his time, and he's not impressive out here at this field. He's also not impressive anywhere else that he fights when he's going through the Overland campaign. Therefore, it's no surprise that during the Battle of the Crater, when Burnside makes those changes and the fight unfolds the way it does there, he's removed from command. Grant is not impressed. May 5th of 1864, Grant comes out here to this clearing that's kind of behind me here. This place was cleared out. It's an overlooking place towards the fields in front of me. Saunders Field is directly ahead. It's about a mile down the road. Grant makes his headquarters out here with General Meade. He gets out here and a reporter notices that he's sitting on a stump. He's whittling wood. He's making piles of shavings at his feet. He's constantly puffing on cigars. People are coming in and out of the camp, and he's sending orders out. He's talking to General Meade. General Meade is really directing a lot of the fight that's happening out here because Grant's not trying to step on anyone's toes. He's in charge of the entire army. General Meade is in charge of the Army of the Potomac. So General Meade is being advised by Grant, but General Meade's in charge. So out here in this location, something significant happens that kind of speaks to the type of relationship the two had with each other and the relationship that Meade actually had with his subordinates. Meade's out here, and Griffin comes riding up on a horse, and he's angry as hell. Nothing's going right for Griffin at the time. He jumps off that horse and he passes Grant and goes directly to Meade. And he starts cursing up a storm. He starts yelling at Meade. He tells Meade that Warren has failed him. He tells Meade that his army has failed him. He tells Meade that even headquarters has failed him. Griffin hops back on his horse, rides off, still angry, and Meade's standing there, and he was calmly listening the entire time and not really going back at him. And Meade's known for his temper. Grant comes over to him, and he looks at him and says, "Who is this Gregg? Who is this General Gregg?" Meade looks at him and corrects him. He says, "It's not Gregg, it's Griffin." And he said, "That's just the way he talks." He reaches out to General Grant and, kind of like a father figure, buttons one of the buttons on the top of his coat and kind of dusts him off a little bit. It broke the tension between the two, and then Grant listened to him, walked away, and never talked about it again. He just let it go. And that showed the confidence that Meade had in his men, but it also showed the patience that Meade exhibited towards his men during battle as well. I mean, he could be an angry, ornery person to deal with, but he also understood the heated moment that they were in, and he understood why that man was feeling the way he was feeling. Now, still out here near General Grant's headquarters at the Battle of the Wilderness, and this battlefield holds some unique features all throughout the woods out here. You can still see clearly marked out here on the ground in front, running along this ridge here, earthworks that are still in place. You would have had probably cannons out here because it was a cleared area. And not to mention, this is a good defensive position. If the army has to fall back from its spot over in Saunders Field even further from where it is, then this is probably going to be a good place for them to fall back to, because there's still a good clearing in front of them, And if an army retreats, it should not completely run from the field. It should have a fallback point. So that's what we have here in front of us. So I'm now at that crossroad, that intersection that we talked about earlier, Orange Plank and Brock Road. You can see the crossroad right behind me. And I'm on the trail that they have out here near one of the Civil War trail signs. This area was a pretty significant area both May 5th and May 6th. Hill's men started rushing up this location on the Orange Plank Road somewhere around afternoon on the 5th of May. At the same time, unbeknownst to him, Getty had been sent up in this direction as well. And the point was to try to take the crossroads behind me. The Vermonters are out here. And in a minute I'll be over at a monument to Vermont. Some of the works that they put out here are still visible today along the Brock Road. That afternoon, for about 6 hours, the Confederates from A.P. Hill and the Vermonters, along with Gettys and the men that would come up in this location with him, ends up fighting here. Hundreds of men fall in these woods. And this intersection becomes very costly. It's almost to a stalemate on that first day. But by May 6th, things start to change. Gettys gets reinforcements. He starts pushing the Confederates back. And he ends up fighting them almost all the way back to the Widow Tap Farm. And back in that location, if you remember, we just talked about Robert E. Lee is back there, and he is with his artillery, and the battery is stood up, firing off in this direction. And that's when he makes some famous remarks from that field about the Texans. Now for some battlefield orientation. Now we're going to put the map up here and take a look at it real close. Try to find the Orange Plank Road and the Brock Road. The Brock Road crosses and intersects with the Orange Plank Road. And you can see the name Gettys there, along with Wadsworth and A.P. Hill. Now that's the opposing sides. Now I'm going to take that down. Out in this direction is the Brock Road. Out in this direction is the Orange Plank Road. It runs back here. Widow Tap Farm is back that way. And off in this direction, Vermont is all throughout here. On day 2, Wadsworth comes up, and they end up dissolving the Confederate front. They push them back about a mile or so, off in this direction over here. And now you can see kind of the traffic flowing. That's the Orange Plank Road that we're talking about. And they push those Confederate soldiers off in that direction about a mile or so. And the Widow Tap Farm is back there. Now take a look all around me and tell me what you see. I am out in a cleared area. This is actually an area that has been cleared out specifically for trail walking. It has a nice trail in it and everything. During the fall, this place is nice and open, and you can still somewhat see, even though the roads behind me disappear because of the thick trees that are around me. During the fight here, May 5th and May 6th, 1864, this location became choked with smoke. The firepower was so great here that when a line would light up, men said that they thought it was lightning. It lit up the forest as the guns went off. And then the smoke would just sit low and hover, real thick. So now not only could you could not see because of these trees, but you also can't see because of all the smoke. But then something terrible happens out here. The sparks from the guns are so concentrated that it hits all this dry brush here. Dead leaves, briars, dead trees, and it sets it on fire. And out here in these fields, you have hundreds of men laying on the ground. They're wounded. They're moaning from pain. They're asking for help. They're asking for water. They can't do anything for themselves. They're just laying there on the ground. And then this place catches on fire. In the melee, all these soldiers are in combat with each other, so they're fighting. They're going back and forth in battle lines. They're following orders. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But the men that are on the ground can't do anything. They're helpless. Some of them are trying to crawl away. Others are so badly wounded that they can't crawl away. And the fire starts to get closer. The heat starts to increase around them. And before too long, it's right next to their bodies. And they start burning up. The flesh starts melting off of their bones. These men scream from the agony and the pain. And eventually, the screams become muffled and they die. Many of the veterans that fought out here talked about those screams, the nightmares that they had about it. This was a horrible place to be, May 5th and May 6th, 1864. And it was a time that would live in those veterans' memories that made it out of here alive for the rest of their lives. They never forgot the fires here at the Wilderness. Now, just like the monument said back there, Vermont suffered over 1,200 casualties out here in these very woods. That meant a lot of their wounded comrades were part of that fire and burned up out here. This was an amazing place to be. A confusing place to be at that. And it wasn't any different on the other side. The Confederates that fought out here suffered greatly too. Except the casualty count as a whole for the Confederate Army here at the Battle of the Wilderness was a lot less than the losses suffered by the Union soldiers. Elmira Patterson lost her husband out here in these fields. But that's not all she lost. Because of the laws where she lived in Birmingham, Pennsylvania, she had to sell her house at Orphans Court to support her family. She received a pension of $350 a year from her husband's service. She sold the house, she sold the property, she sold a lot of her things, and then in 1868, one of her 3 children died of scarlet fever. She never fully recovers from this, and then she dies in 1910, a widow. It's pretty amazing the suffering that people went through as a result of this war. Now, back in Yorkville, South Carolina, there was another woman that was mourning and suffering. Miss Jenkins learned that her husband, Micah Jenkins, was out here, right off the Orange Plank Road, with General Longstreet. And as they were riding up, Micah Jenkins was shot in the head by some of his own men. As Jenkins was being carted off the field, one soldier said that they could see Jenkins cheering on his men. For some reason, somehow, he was still able to do that. But Jenkins ends up dying because the bullet went through his brain. She, too, also suffered the same fate as a lot of the families, just like Elmira Patterson suffered, with a husband gone and a house in disarray, and being left to fend for herself back home in Yorkville, South Carolina. Those families are the ones that suffered the most. Directly behind me here is a monument that was placed in honor of Wadsworth. And out in this location here is where he actually took the bullet that mortally wounded him and caused him to die. In this location, he's trying to resist the fight that's happening here. He's trying to stop the Confederates from pushing back and taking that Brock Road and Plank Road intersection. But there is an attack that's launched by Moxley, thanks to Longstreet, and they find an unfinished railroad cut to kind of sneak down and through and come around the side. As a result of that sneak pass and that sneak attack, Wadsworth is here in this location, and he ends up losing his life. You also have Major Henry Abbott, who also dies as a result of the fighting in this location too. So this is some pretty tough hand-to-hand fighting out here, but you can tell by the location where this is, the Union soldiers had fought and pushed the Confederates from a long distance. Directly behind me, that road stretching back in that direction, it's about a half a mile or so already, maybe even 3/4 of a mile, where the Confederates started their fight. And they got pushed back past this point where Wadsworth is right now. So they were victorious for a chance there for a moment. And then Longstreet comes into play, and the next thing you know, the fight's pretty much over with here on the Orange Plank Road for these Union officers and soldiers. Currently walking out in the field that was once known as the Widow Tap Farm. It was because the old lady that used to live here and her farm. General Lee came over to these fields during the battle and realized it was a bit of a ridge and a clearing, and he could get artillery pieces over here and aim those artillery pieces towards that intersection that's so valuable. Because, number one, if those soldiers come up around the Plank Road and they're on this area, they can get to the flank of Lee's army, which is over near Saunders Field, the majority of them. Number two, if they can get cannons over here and place them in this location, they can then support the fight that's happening with Heth over at the Brock intersection with the Union Army over there in Gettys. And this is kind of a fallback point. They have always been good at finding fields out here near this area in the Chancellorsville battles and other battles around here to place cannons so that they could make it advantageous for them and fight and drive off the artillery pieces in the other direction. But this time it was a necessity that they get them placed over here. By the next day, on May 6th, the Union soldiers have started to push the Confederate Army back in this area. They've driven them a mile to a mile and a half back. And it's so bad, it's to the point to where General Lee is getting so frustrated and worried that he's coming up to General Gregg and asking him, basically, what's the matter with your men? Are they not fighters anymore? Why are they fleeing? And of course, those soldiers were being pressed very heavily, and he tells Lee that essentially, my men they're falling back in order. They're not retreating from the field. They are still willing to fight. Well, in the nick of time, you have General Longstreet showing up. For a few moments on that spring day, the Confederate Army faced disaster. General Longstreet's corps arrived, and he kept everything cool. Longstreet says, we'll straighten this thing out shortly. Lee rides up, and as he's looking out across these fields where Longstreet's men are, he then looks out and says to Gregg, who are those men over there? And Gregg says, those are the Texans. Lee shouts, "Hurrah for Texas." And then he gets excited. He gets up in his stirrups and he yells, "The Texans always drive them back." Or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But he's very excited about the Texans being here and that surge of men coming across this field. So you can imagine Lee is probably feeling like he's on the brink of defeat at that point. Because, like I said, if that army comes down this road and it ends up hitting them, it's going to hit their flank and they're done. Well, it saved him. Longstreet comes up, he pushes his men forward, and they end up driving those Union soldiers back to the Brock Road intersection and beyond. As a result, like I said earlier, Grant ends up realizing he's not going to win here. So he takes his men and he moves further on and ends up at Spotsylvania. But Lee gets so up in his saddle about this whole situation that he then starts to ride a little bit too far forward. And he starts cheering on his men and hollering and telling them to keep going, keep moving forward, press those men, move those people. Well, the soldiers around him start to realize, holy crap, General Lee is out here amongst the regular soldiers and too far forward. He's in danger. So then they start yelling, "Lee to the rear. General Lee, you must go to the rear." They grab his horse and they startle him. And he yells at them to let go of his horse. But then, reluctantly, he realizes he is too far forward. And if he dies, then a lot of the men will have a hard time with that. So, he backs up and he goes to a safer location and allows his army to continue to fight and do what they've been doing all those years leading up to this point. But again, as a result of Longstreet being out here at this position, he saves the day and the Confederates live to fight another day. Once Texas is in the fold and the fight gets pushed back in this direction, everything that the Northern Army gained up until this point is now lost. The Confederates are pushing them back inch by inch. And eventually, the Union soldiers are back behind the breastworks that they had across the Brock Road. The Confederates are stymied. They're stuck where they're at. Grant, realizing that he can't make any headway where he's at, decides that he's going to take his army and continue to move. But this time, instead of turning around and moving in the opposite direction, he makes that famous turn that lets his entire army know that this is not the same general as all the other generals they fought with before. This man's going to continue to press towards Richmond, and he's going to continue to fight. Men cheer. The officers try to get them to calm down. There's no calming them down. They know Grant's going to bring the end of the war soon. For a little battlefield orientation. The widow's house and farm is over there, off in that little area. Back behind me here, you can see an artillery piece off in the distance. This is where Lee's placed a lot of the artillery that's facing the Orange Plank Road. Longstreet's come up in this direction, and his men are getting into line of battle and moving out. Somewhere out in this area is where Lee famously says, "The Texans always move them. Hurrah for Texas." Right out in this area here. That's also where he gets told to get to the rear. That's that Orange Plank Road that we were talking about, and it travels down in that direction where the Brock Road intersection is. And off in this direction, Saunders Field and the two houses that we went to earlier, or the locations of the two farms that we went to earlier, is off in that direction. Now, I'm at the Whittle Tap Farm out here, And I'm going to talk about something that happened on the Orange Plank Road right there ahead of me. And the reason why I'm talking about it here is because the stop out here at this battlefield for you to pull off is about 2 cars deep. You really don't have a lot of space to walk around or do anything. There's no trail out there that's special. The actual action happened out here on the Orange Plank Road. And it's just dangerous in the first place to be goofing around out there with a camera in your hand. So, but Longstreet and his staff are riding up this road. And they're headed towards that Brock intersection. They're scouting out areas. And they're trying to figure out what they can do to take advantage of the situation that they're in. And just like General Jackson, Longstreet and staff come under friendly fire. Now you gotta remember, we're out here in the wilderness, so the men that are on either side of this road, they don't know what's going on in between. They just know that something's moving around, and they begin to fire. Well, the officers around Longstreet start yelling, "Friend, we're your friend." They didn't listen to them, and they continued to fire. And as a result, a couple of men go down. One of those men die. Another man, General Longstreet, takes a bullet to his throat and ends up going into his right shoulder. It puts him out of commission for quite a while, and it nearly cost him his life. But the irony of it all is it happened in May of 1864. 1 year earlier, General Thomas Stonewall Jackson would also be wounded by friendly fire, and he would also suffer a severe wound as a result. But unfortunately for Jackson, he ends up dying of his wound because he contracts pneumonia and dies of sickness just a few short days later. So as promised, I'm now in that location where I talked about lead to the rear, lead to the rear. And you can see directly behind me here is the Confederate trenches. And there's a sign here placed that's talking about Lee yelling, "Hurrah for Texas," and his men grabbing him and moving him back and yelling at him to get to the rear because they're worried about their general dying out here on this field. They don't want Robert E. Lee to die. They don't want anyone to die, really, but Robert E. Lee is a figurehead of their fight here, and he's probably one of the most masterful generals that they have on the field, and they know it. So they're trying to get him out of harm's way, really. And out here at this same location is a monument to Texas. The Texas Brigade that came out here and fought so wonderfully for General Lee at the Battle of the Wilderness. So what does this really cost out here? Well, for the Union, we're looking at between 14,000 and 17,000 casualties. For the Confederates, anywhere between 7,000 and 11,000 casualties. For both sides, very valuable officers end up dying. Several high-ranking officials die out here in these fields. Hayes, one of them. Longstreet takes a bullet to the throat that puts him out of commission, and he could have died out here too. You have Wadsworth. You have Hayes. You have many other officers just like them out here on this field, fighting for their lives, and they all end up perishing. In the end, this is I guess a victory for the Confederacy, but it doesn't do more than just stop the Union from traveling in this direction. Grant pushes off, ends up in Spotsylvania. Thousands more die. Grant pushes off and goes further south. Ends up down in North Anna. More people die there. Eventually, with the Overland campaign, Grant ends up in Petersburg, takes siege to the town, ends up taking the town, ends up taking the railroads, and ends up taking Lee's army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox in 1865. Effectively bringing a real end to the majority of the fighting especially the fighting on the East Coast. It's a costly victory, for sure, here at the Battle of the Wilderness, but it's one that neither side will ever forget, especially when talking about the fires in the fields that surrounded this area. If you ever have the time, make sure you stop and come walk these fields for yourself. Check this place out. You won't be sorry you did. Now, I couldn't think of a better place to end this video than right here in the middle of the woods, the Battle of the Wilderness, at the hotly contested Brock and Plank Road, Orange Plank Road. Not too far in that direction, Longstreet's wounded. Right here where I'm at right now is a place where men like Wadsworth and Hayes end up losing their lives. Families lose loved ones. Soldiers burn to death in these fields around me here. If you let these fields do it, they'll touch your soul. Till next time, this is History with Waffles.